In the middle of a 1974 concert, Elvis's microphone completely died. 60,000 people fell silent in the Houston Astrodome. Instead of stopping the show, Elvis set down the mic and started singing acoustically. What happened next became the most powerful performance of his career. It was March 3rd, 1974, and the Houston Astrodome was packed with 60,000 people waiting for Elvis Presley. The energy was electric. This was one of the biggest venues Elvis had ever played, and the anticipation was overwhelming. Elvis had been struggling. His marriage to Priscilla had ended. His health was declining. The medications were taking their toll. Some nights, performing felt like climbing a mountain with weights tied to his ankles. But tonight, he was determined to give these people everything he had. The show started strong. Elvis moved through his set list with the band behind him, drums thundering, guitars wailing, horns punching through the massive sound system. The crowd was on their feet, screaming, singing along. Then, 45 minutes into the show, right in the middle of "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'," Elvis's microphone cut out completely. At first, Elvis thought it was just a momentary glitch. He tapped the mic, moved to another position on stage. Nothing. The band kept playing, but Elvis's voice was gone from the sound system. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and stage assistant, rushed over with a backup microphone. Dead. Another backup. Also dead. The sound engineer later determined that a main power surge had fried the entire vocal system. All the microphones, all the monitors, everything that carried Elvis's voice to the massive crowd. The band gradually stopped playing as they realized what was happening. The Astrodome fell into confused silence. 60,000 people waited to see what would happen next. Elvis stood center stage, holding a dead microphone, facing the largest crowd of his career with no way to be heard. This was the moment he could have apologized, could have taken a break while they fixed the equipment, could have ended the show early and rescheduled. Instead, Elvis set down the microphone, and he started to sing, without amplification, without technology. Just his voice, raw and acoustic, in a stadium designed for 60,000 people. At first, only the people in the first few rows could hear him, but something remarkable happened. The crowd, sensing what Elvis was trying to do, fell completely silent. Not the usual concert silence where there's still shuffling and murmuring. Absolute, breathless silence. And in that silence, Elvis's voice carried. It didn't fill the stadium the way the speakers had, but it reached. It traveled. It echoed off the curved dome ceiling and bounced back, creating a natural acoustic that was eerie and beautiful. Elvis was singing "Bridge Over Troubled Water," one of his most powerful ballads. Without the microphone, without the band, it became something else entirely. It became intimate, personal. As if Elvis was singing directly to each person in that massive crowd. People in the back rows strained to hear, leaning forward, hands cupped to their ears. But they didn't shout or complain. They just listened as hard as they could. The acoustics of the Astrodome, designed for sports and built with a distinctive domed ceiling, created unexpected echoes. Elvis's voice would sing a line, and then the stadium itself would softly repeat it, creating layers of sound that no technology could replicate. James Burton, Elvis's guitarist, realized what was happening. He signaled to the band to stay quiet. This moment needed to be exactly what it was. Just Elvis and his voice and 60,000 people holding their breath. Elvis sang the entire song acoustically. When he finished, there was a beat of absolute silence. Then the Astrodome erupted. The applause was deafening, thunderous, filled with an emotion that went beyond normal concert excitement. People were crying, not sad tears, but tears of having witnessed something transcendent, something pure, something they knew they'd never experience again. A woman in the crowd later described it. "I've been to hundreds of concerts. I've heard the best sound systems, the biggest productions, but I've never heard anything as beautiful as Elvis's voice, unamplified, echoing through that dome. It was like hearing an angel sing in a cathedral." After the applause died down, Elvis spoke. His voice carried better now that everyone was trained to listen in the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis said, his natural speaking voice somehow reaching across the massive space, "I apologize for the technical difficulties. The sound crew is working on fixing the microphones, but that might take a while." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces barely visible in the arena lights. "I have a choice to make. I can wait for the equipment to be fixed, or I can keep going like this, but I need you to help me. I need you to be completely quiet. Can you do that?" The crowd roared their agreement, then immediately fell silent again, understanding the contract Elvis was asking them to enter. "All right then," Elvis said, smiling now. "Let's see what happens when we strip everything away and just have the music." For the next 30 minutes, Elvis performed acoustically. He did songs he'd never done without full amplification. He did gospel hymns that had been arranged for big band productions, but sounded heartbreaking with just his voice. He did "How Great Thou Art," and the sound of 60,000 people hearing Elvis's voice echo through that dome during the climax was described by witnesses as a religious experience. Between songs, Elvis talked to the crowd in his normal speaking voice. He told stories about learning to sing in church as a child, about how music started as just a voice and a feeling before anyone added instruments or amplifiers. "This right here," Elvis said, gesturing to the stripped-down moment they were sharing. "This is how music started, just human voices and human hearts. Everything else, the lights, the costumes, the speakers, that's all wonderful. But it's not what music is. Music is this connection between us." A teenager in the audience, Sarah Thompson, later wrote about the experience in her college entrance essay. "Elvis Presley taught me that night that the most powerful technology in the world is the human voice. That night, without any equipment, he reached 60,000 people more deeply than any perfectly produced concert ever could." During this acoustic set, something else remarkable happened. The crowd began singing along, but softly, creating a massive choir effect. On songs everyone knew, 60,000 voices joined Elvis's, blending into something larger than any individual voice could be. "Love Me Tender" became a dialogue between Elvis and his audience. Each verse passed back and forth, creating harmonies that emerged spontaneously from the crowd. Finally, after 30 minutes, a sound engineer appeared on stage and whispered to Charlie Hodge. The microphones were fixed. Charlie handed Elvis a working microphone. Elvis held it, then looked at it for a long moment. "You know what?" Elvis said into the working mic, his voice now booming through the speakers. "This is wonderful, but I think we just proved we don't really need it, did we?" The crowd went wild. Elvis did the rest of his planned show with the microphones working properly. The band came back. The full production resumed. It was spectacular. But everyone in that arena knew that the real concert, the unforgettable moment, had been those 30 minutes without technology. Those 30 minutes of pure, unfiltered connection between a performer and his audience. News of what happened at the Houston Astrodome spread through the music industry like wildfire. Musicians who'd relied on bigger and bigger sound systems, more and more elaborate productions, started talking about what Elvis had proven that night. Frank Sinatra, when he heard the story, said, "Elvis reminded everyone that night that music is about the singer, not the system. You can have the best speakers in the world, but if you don't have something real to say, what's the point?" Sound engineers at other venues began studying the Astrodome's acoustics, trying to understand how Elvis's voice had carried so effectively. They found that the combination of the dome's shape, Elvis's vocal training from years of gospel singing, and the absolute silence of the crowd had created perfect conditions for natural acoustic projection. But they also concluded that it couldn't be replicated. It was a one-time miracle of circumstances and human commitment. People who'd been at the concert became almost evangelical about the experience. They'd tell friends, family, anyone who'd listen, "You don't understand. I've been to rock concerts with walls of amplifiers, but I've never heard anything like Elvis's natural voice filling that space." Elvis himself was transformed by the experience. In interviews after, he talked about how that equipment failure had freed him. For years, I've been hiding behind bigger production, Elvis admitted in a 1975 interview. More lights, louder speakers, flashier costumes, and that night, all of that got stripped away. It was terrifying for about 10 seconds, and then it was liberating. He continued, I realized I'd forgotten what made me fall in love with music in the first place. It wasn't spectacle, it was connection. It was standing on a stage or on a porch or in a church and sharing something real with people through song. That's the magic. Everything else is just decoration. For the remaining concerts of that tour, Elvis made a change. He added an acoustic segment to every show, not because the equipment failed, but by choice. He'd have the band step to the front of the stage with just his voice, and sing one song acoustically. It became a highlight of every show, a moment where the massive production paused and Elvis reminded everyone why they'd come, not for the spectacle, but for the music. Bootleg recordings of the acoustic portion of the Houston Astrodome show exist, though the quality is poor. Audience members with portable recorders captured what they could. But even those low-quality recordings give a sense of what happened. You can hear Elvis's voice, distant and echoing. You can hear the absolute silence of 60,000 people. You can hear the collective intake of breath when Elvis hit certain notes. And you can hear, in the applause after each song, the sound of people who've witnessed something transcendent. Audio engineers who've analyzed these recordings point out that the silence is actually the most remarkable part. In a crowd that size, there's usually constant ambient noise, coughing, shifting, whispering. But in these recordings, there are stretches where you hear nothing but Elvis's voice and the dome's echo. That silence is people choosing to be part of something, said acoustic specialist Dr. Robert Chen. That's 60,000 individuals deciding simultaneously to create the conditions for magic. That's as impressive as Elvis's singing. Today, the story of the Houston Astrodome acoustic concert is legendary among Elvis fans and music historians. It's cited in discussions about the difference between technology and talent, between production and performance. It's also become a parable for musicians getting started. When young singers ask established performers for advice, they often hear, "Remember the Houston Astrodome. Elvis proved that night that if you have real talent and real connection with your audience, you don't need anything else. Everything else is enhancement, not essence." The lesson goes beyond music. In a world increasingly dependent on technology, mediated experiences, and digital enhancement, the story of Elvis singing acoustically to 60,000 people reminds us that sometimes the most powerful moments come when technology fails and we're forced back to basics, back to human voice and human ears, back to one person sharing their heart and thousands of people choosing to really listen. In 2024, the Houston Astrodome, now largely unused, occasionally hosts special events. Sometimes, Elvis impersonators request permission to stand on the stage where Elvis stood and attempt what he did, singing acoustically in that massive space. None have succeeded in making their voices carry the way Elvis's did, partly because the acoustic conditions were unique that night, but mostly because they're missing the essential ingredient, 60,000 people so moved by what they're experiencing that they create perfect silence. The equipment failure that night could have been a disaster. It could have ended the show, disappointed thousands of people, become a story of technical incompetence. Instead, it became a miracle. Because Elvis made a choice. He chose to trust his voice, to trust his audience, to trust that music, real music, didn't need technology to be powerful. And for 30 minutes on March 3rd, 1974, he proved it. 60,000 people held their breath and heard an angel singing in a dome. They heard what music sounded like before there were speakers and amplifiers and mixing boards. They heard the purest form of performance, one human being sharing their gift with other human beings who cared enough to really listen. That's not just a concert. That's not just a moment. That's what music is supposed to be. If this story of stripping away technology to find truth moved you, subscribe and share it. When have you experienced something more powerful because technology failed? Let us know in the comments. Hit that notification bell for more true stories about the moments when we remember what really matters.